Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Collaboration Among Arts and Culture Organizations. This morning's topic in the Iowa Ideas, Arts and Culture track. And we'd like to, first of all, give a big shout out and thank you to ITC Midwest, which is our presenting sponsor for this year's conference. I'm Diana Nolan. I'll be your host. I am the Arts and Entertainment writer at the Gazette. I've been with the company for 42 years and reporting on arts and culture all that time, but it was my main focus beginning about 15 years ago. So this is my dream job, and I'm happy to have you all on board. Let's go around the room and meet our panelists. Let's start with you, Andrew.
My name is Andrew Sherburn. I am the co-founder and executive director of Film Scene in Iowa City. We've been operating for about 10 years. We've got two locations, five screens, and show about 450 movies a year to 80,000 people here in Eastern Iowa.
It's such a cool facility, too. I've been in both of the venues, and they're equally exciting. There's something very cool and organic about the original one, and then something very modern and yet still very welcoming about the new facility just a few blocks away. And
Thanks.
Dan, please tell us who you are.
Hi, I'm Dan Perry, and I teach sculpture at the University of Northern Iowa. I'm a practicing public artist and gallery artist, and I also run a program called the Public Art Incubator, which here at UNI, which is a unique program where artists can come to us once they've been commissioned to create an artwork, and we hire students to work alongside that artist to fabricate the artwork and install it in communities. We've been doing it since 2011, and I believe we've done around 60 projects throughout the region. Yeah, that's what I do.
Excellent. And Betsy.
I'm Betsy Potter. I'm the executive director of the Iowa City Downtown District. We also work very closely and kind of help manage the downtown Iowa City Cultural and Entertainment District. So we work with a number of our partners within the community arts venues and for-profits, not-for-profits, and then local artists too.
Excellent. Dan, what parts of the state do you reach or have you reached so far?
We've like our student work, our projects have gone pretty much all across the state and branching out into some of our neighboring states. And we've even done some collaborative work with artists from both coasts and the Bahamas.
Oh, that's very cool. Betsy, what's your role in facilitating collaborations?
Sure. So we work with a lot of groups when it comes to arts and culture, but our facilitation most recently in the last year and a half has been with our partners in the downtown cultural and entertainment district. So we have been kind of bringing all of those partners together, about 25 in total, to meet monthly to work on branding, marketing collaboratively, and then also on upcoming events and ways that they can all work better together. So our role has been in facilitation for the most part, but then we also get our hands dirty in some of the events and marketing to help with all of the groups kind of coming together under one message.
Excellent. And Andrew, how do you branch out beyond the film side of it?
Well, film we think is just a great tool for engaging communities in dialogues and conversations and in communal experiences. So right now, actually, we're 1 week out from one of our big showcase events, the Refocus Film Festival. That film festival will showcase about 30 feature and short films from around the world. But the festival is also an opportunity for us to engage our local community. So we have over 30 local visual and musical artists that will present work before every showtime at the festival. So each show is preceded by live music or a visual art display. We've also got poetry readings, two commissioned art pieces, all packed into this one festival. So that's just one example of how we're engaging with local artists of all stripes, not just filmmakers, to support their work and kind of bring people together and collaborate. And then throughout the year, I think last year I was just checking the numbers yesterday. We worked with about 65 different organizational partners within the community. So those are nonprofits, activist groups. We're so close to the University of Iowa, so campus organizations, and using film as an opportunity to start a conversation. So, we'll work together to select a film, maybe bring in panelists for a post screening discussion, and really let that film be a jumping off point for kind of deeper consideration of the world that we live in.
And you've had some heavy hitters that have come in. It's not just Iowa City folk who come and speak before your shows. You've got a national reach.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we think is important is for audiences to have a chance to meet the filmmakers, the artists behind the work that they see on screen. And we think that's great for the filmmakers too. So we have a number of programs that bring filmmakers in throughout the year. The film festival being one. I think we have 20 guests this year. Some of them from nearby, some of them from quite a ways away. And so, yeah, it's a chance for artists and audiences to get together and share the experience, and then go a little deeper into the understanding the making of that art.
There was a German filmmaker who came through in this past year, who only had like 4 stops in the U.S., and you were one of them.
Oh, this a young man named Werner Herzog. Yes, he was. Yeah, Werner Herzog was our like showcase guest at last year's festival. So he did a brief New York, Boston, Iowa City, Los Angeles tour to support his autobiography. I'm talking about his life in film.
Which just goes to show we are not flyover country. We are stop and be here country.
Exactly. He very specifically wanted to come to this community because he was a filmmaker, but he also wanted to, be known for his literary work. And he had a new book, and this is a city of literature. And so it was important. It wasn't just chance that he ended up here.
So Betsy, for folks who are watching us who perhaps want to do an art collaboration, how do they even get started?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times it depends on what collaboration you're looking for. But what we've found as we're a self-supported municipal improvement district. So we're always working with different groups. Collaboration is essentially all we do all the time. And so it depends on the type of project you're looking to do. But what we've found is that most people you want to collaborate with are 100% willing to collaborate with you. And the first step is just asking. And so I would not be intimidated to ever just ask and start the conversation, whether it's an email or, an in-person meeting. But there are a lot of opportunities out there once you start that conversation, especially if you lean into partners that have amazing expertise. So we work with Andrew a lot at Film Scene because they have amazing expertise that we don't have on our own team, or maybe aren't integrated into a collaboration we're already working on. So recently we're working on a public art installation within our downtown in a lighting element, and we really needed an artist's expertise on the project because although it was a great concept, we need the artist to come in and kind of give us those expertise and make sure that this is a doable project. So we reached out to someone we knew. We reached out to a partner, that may have an artist that works in that medium, and all the connections came together in the right way. So I think the first step is just like finding those people to ask, start the conversation. And if it's not them, they probably know of someone because the artist groups are very tight within communities and they all work together already. So from our perspective, it's always just starting the conversation and seeing how many partners you can get in the room because it always ends up with a better product.
Were you involved in getting the giant inflatable bunny rabbits down on the Ped Mall a year or two ago? Those were so cool.
Yes. Yeah. That was an international artist, but, talk about collaboration. Although that international artist brought their, public art, their temporary installation to Iowa City, we needed someone to come in and help us with the installation. We don't have any expertise in inflatable installations. And so Public Space One helped us with that because we said, we know you've done this before. Can you come in and help us to know how to weight it down, how to, install correctly, how to make sure these things don't blow away in the wind. And so we worked with Public Space One to help us with that installation too. Although it was an artist from Australia, they came in and kind of gave us, their expertise, and they were helping us install those bunnies in the middle of winter too.
So it's kind of like the sky's the limit when it comes to collaborating, it feels like. Dan, how do you get your word out? How do people find out about, your public art incubator and what you have going on there at UNI?
A lot of it comes through word of mouth and just the connections that we've made over the years. We work we're sort of I like to think of it as a conduit. And so we kind of work on both ends of both helping communities get started with public art projects, but also helping artists fabricate the work and making sure the projects are successful. And so based on our successful projects, word gets around through the Iowa Arts Council, through different communities and connections we make. And a lot of our students that graduate, they go out into the state and they take on teaching jobs and they take on community roles and they start still maintaining their artist careers. And so through there, they send us back our way. So it's kind of a nice network that we're building and continue to grow over time. So a lot of the networking comes from not only just supporting communities in these endeavors of creating landmarks and cultural environments in their cities and towns, and it comes back to us a lot.
So how does it work, Dan? If a community like my small town where I grew up, Mediapolis, decided, we kind of got our feet wet this summer when RAGBRAI came through and some local art students did some like selfie background paintings on a business window where people could stop. Or we see wings. That's the real popular thing now in different neighborhoods where you can take a selfie against wings and look angelic. So how does it work? If somebody from my hometown said, hey, we want to put a statue of Diana Nolan in our park, like that's ever going to happen. But how would they come to you and how does it work from idea to realization?
So the process usually starts with, I might meet somebody at a conference, I might get an email from somebody, get a phone call, and then we start talking about the project. So usually a community has identified a space. Hopefully they've identified funding, and then you start looking for the collaborators. So have they identified an artist based on, how much do they want? What kind of budget are they working with? Do you want to look at local artists? Do you want to look at student artists? Do you want to expand and go national, international, and sort of determine the scope of what they're doing? And then from there, we start identifying, how do you put out a call for artists? Are you looking for proposals up front? Are you looking just for portfolios up front? How do you narrow it down to that process? How do you communicate these things to artists? Once you've identified an artist, then we can determine is it something that we can complete? Can we fabricate it here at UNI? Do we need to use local vendors? Do we need to use local industries back in the place where it's going? So maybe a town where it's going has a certain, for example, like a metal fabrication shop that wants to be involved. Maybe they take part of it in some role of that. For us, we look at it as, can we involve students? Can we involve the community? Does the artist be very hands-on, or are they sort of at a distance? And those are all variables that change with each project. But what I find that's the most successful thing is just that we do careful planning. We make sure we take extra time to make sure the artwork or whatever is going in, a mural, sculpture, whatever, is the highest quality we can do, because Iowa weather is not kind to things outside, and so we have to make sure that it's going to last for a long time. So this investment this community wants to make comes back to them, and like you're talking about selfies with the murals of wings, and that becomes parts of communities that make them a tourist destination. So I want to go see these wings. I want to go see this artwork. I want to take my picture in front of it. I'm going to post it on social media, and then it starts to snowball from there. Like, where is that? Where can I see that? Can I go there? And so, our role in that is just to sort of be a facilitator and hopefully make these projects successful. And then once they're out in the world, they take on a life of their own.
Is there a cost involved? Like if a committee from Mediapolis wanted to involve your organization, do they have to pay for that, or how does that work?
I mean, it just depends on the initial consultation. I usually just I'm happy to have the conversation and talk it through with people. I do that just because I believe in it. But then the more involved it gets, like if you want us to come visit and do an assessment, if you want to the more we get involved, then yeah, we like to pay our students to be involved in this. I think that's important, because then they start to take ownership of these projects. And so that money needs to come from somewhere. So we're a self-funded program. We don't use the university's funding for any of this, so it's all outside contract. I think they call it a fee for service program. And so, yeah, we would establish an agreement. So let's say you want us to make a public art assessment for this one project. Say like, well, that's going to take us, 40 hours, and we calculate it like, okay, well, I'm going to need 2 students to do this. How much is going to cost to pay them to do this? Is there any materials involved? Is there any travel involved? And so it's all sort of a case by case basis.
So would it be like, are we talking like $1,000, $5,000?
Yeah, like
what
I would say like a basic assessment for just like, let's say your town wants to start a public art committee. That would take us some time to put together a presentation, maybe acquire some data, put some information together, and that may take us a week. And so we might say like, well, it's going to cost $500, and it just depends on how involved, how in depth, and then yeah, from there it just becomes once you've identified, let's say you have a project, you have a grant, and you want to use it toward a public art project. Then we can take that, we'll establish, okay, well, this is the artist you selected, this is the project, the proposal you've approved. And so it's going to cost this much for materials and this much for our labor to actually do the project.
Betsy, do you have any words of wisdom on applying for grants, like what some of the major sources are in the state, and how people might go about connecting with those? Do you have words of wisdom for us on that? Oops, you seem to be frozen. Well, oh, there. I think you've thawed. Betsy, did you hear my question?
I did. Yeah. I mean, they like Dan and Andrew might have a better recommendation for grants, but there's the Iowa Arts Council and the Iowa Economic IDEA has a number of grants every year, so look to those. And then I would, what we do a lot is we work directly with our city and our county to see what grant opportunities may exist. So our city has a small public art advisory committee, and they do hand out small grants every year, and they try to do a number of them. So I would look to those programs in your own communities on whether or not there's grant funding within the city and the county in addition to the state grants that might be available.
How about you, Andrew? Anything to add or any recommendations for folks?
No, I think Betsy nailed it, actually. Just to look at the Iowa Arts Council is wonderful in supporting art projects around the state, and they have annual opportunities to submit, and then look locally. I wish there were more funding opportunities, quite honestly, for this sort of work from private philanthropic supporters. So if there's any on the call today, start putting some money together, because I think it really does create a lot of vibrancy. I'm just thinking about the public art, things that Dan and Betsy are speaking to, and it really does create an extra vibrancy in every community that has public art. So I would love to see more.
I know that when I was in my young 20s and I was putting together a touring program, creative dramatics for the schools, and I was looking to the Iowa Arts Council to apply for grants. It just looked so daunting when I looked at the form that I decided to take it like I did my taxes back then, one line at a time, and it worked. But I also had a mentor in the community who really helped me and kind of looked at my what I had done and made some suggestions, whatever. And luckily, I was successful in securing the grant. But I do know that those can look a little daunting. How would you find a mentor? There was a woman who was active in Theater Cedar Rapids at the time, and was kind of our go-to person. But how do you find a mentor? Betsy, do you have any advice on that?
I think there's phenomenal grant writers probably throughout the state. It doesn't matter if you live in a town of, 100 or in a town of 100,000, there's a number of people who are probably writing grants for other nonprofits that may be able to help you. Our community foundation, and there's community foundations throughout, a lot of times they will help with grant writing, or they can provide some assistance and recommendations for your grant writing. So I would definitely recommend, leaning into your community foundations. They're very, very great experts on that. And then your nonprofit leaders. So if you can have, coffee with them, or it doesn't matter what sector they're in, grant writing's grant writing, and they know how to answer a lot of the questions. And then, overall, I'm not an expert in grant writing at all, but my recommendation when we do it, or when others are looking to do it, is take your time. Don't do it the day of, and make sure that you are, just being honest, and you have the mission of your project kind of figured out. If you're going out there with like this ambiguous idea, that's probably not that's going to communicate kind of vague in a grant application. So know exactly what you are applying for, have a really, really strong program, description and mission behind it. And that will, it's not rocket science overall. You're just describing a really cool project in your community. So mentorship is great, and grant writing, expertise is great. And then also just like knowing what project, the ins and outs, your full budget, to Dan's point, understanding what your budget is, understanding the nuances of a budget, whether it's public art or something else, and making sure that, you're kind of also putting some wiggle room in there, because everything costs more than what you think it will.
Dan, what was the impetus for Public Art Incubator? And how long has it been going on? I don't remember if we've answered that or not.
Yeah, it started in 2011. And so, I went to school to be an artist. That's not the whole story, but anyway, I ended up becoming an artist. And one of the biggest things that I had as an impact was working with my professors on some of their projects. And so they would be commissioned to do something, and I would serve as an artist assistant. And so I realized that when I started my own career as an artist, that I like to hire students to help me. But then I also realized there's a need, as we're all talking about public art in different ways here. It's really booming, and people understand that it's important for communities. It's an economic driver, culture driver, and there's a lot of public art projects going on. And a lot of times communities, will commission an artist, and sometimes the artists realize, well, I've got this commission now, but how do I make this thing that I just proposed? I don't have a big facility, my studio is small and this thing needs to be big, or whatever the needs are. And so I thought, we have great facilities here. It's a good opportunity to bring artists in from all over to our campus, into Iowa. And so bringing those artists in, and students get to work directly with them. So they're not just hearing my voice all the time, they're hearing somebody else's voice, and they're learning from different perspectives. They're seeing how other people work. And so I thought it fit a need. And there's been times where communities have gotten in a position where they're like, well, we have an artist contracted, the thing needs to go up soon, and we're under a deadline, we need some help. And so we would be able to step in some cases and help with that. So yeah, it was a need that I saw, and my colleagues saw that we could fill that need. And it's something that, when we started it, we didn't think it would be as successful as it has been. But it's something that, art fabricators aren't a new thing. There are several art fabricators in the private industry, but I thought in this role, making it more open and accessible for students and communities, because they can come in at any point and see the process. And we're a little bit different than, say, like a straight fabrication place where they look at the drawing and they make the thing. We can look at a drawing, the artist can be there, and we can start having a conversation. It's like, well, yeah, we need some extra structure here, but what if we make it look better so it doesn't look just like structure? And so we can add artistic decisions along with making things, crafting them well and sound for communities.
And now you can also have your students make it. So like if I submitted a drawing that's, I would like to see this come to fruition, but I don't necessarily have the skills to make that happen. I can take my idea to you guys, and your students can realize that. That's part of it too, isn't it?
Yes. Yep. So like, we've had artists that are maybe traditionally painters, and they've, made a proposal for a sculptural artwork, and they've never, say, welded before, and they don't understand, fabrication, but they have a great idea and the community's, supported it. They like the idea, so everybody's on board. And yeah, they can come to us with that, and the students, will, we would teach them, like from that point, like I take their drawing and I teach students, okay, this is how we're going to fabricate it. Here's the skills that you'll need. Teach them the skills and start to develop it. And a lot of times the students develop their own sort of process. One of the things that I tend to forget about is, like, sometimes in the classroom, a lot of things that you're doing is a simulation. And so this becomes a real world application where it has to be done on time. It has to be on budget. It has to be made well. It can't just be like, well, I'm making this for a grade, and if it doesn't go well, then I'll just throw it in the garbage. But these are which happens, unfortunately. But these are real world applications. So they start to take pride in it. They start to work with each other. They build even these sort of interesting little communities as students, that they start to hold each other accountable. They start to help each other. They teach each other. So it becomes a really nice sort of cycle there. They start to build up and take pride in these things.
And then do they get to go to the town and see it installed? So they can see where their work ended up?
Oh yeah, they that's the whole part of it. We do from start to finish. They help with the drawing and the design, to making the model, to fabricating, to getting in the truck and driving the artwork on a trailer down to wherever. Like this summer, we installed some sculptures in Indianola on light poles as part of their revitalization project, and their hot air balloon type sculptures that spin. And so there was a day we were down on scaffolding, climbing on light poles and installing artwork. So they get to do some things that they probably wouldn't have expected to do. And they also, I think, really surprise themselves, that they're like, well, I just told my parents I learned how to weld, or I just told my parents that I spent all day, installing a 10,000 pound artwork. And so it's like, yeah, so it's a real empowering experience for them.
Climbing on scaffolding is a very good role for students. Young people who can climb and not care.
I'm afraid of heights, so that's what they get to do.
Andrew, you've involved community from the get-go. How did you get first the idea for Film Scene and then launching it? Because it wasn't just you and your cohort sitting in a room making it happen.
Yeah, well, I think part of it was really necessity, and I think a lot of great projects are born out of necessity. Iowa City at the time when Film Scene was founded had lost its downtown movie theater, which had closed in 2007, and so it had been a few years. And my co-founder Andy Brody and I were just lamenting it and having conversations with other people in the community, like, hey, there needs to be a downtown movie theater. This is the cultural epicenter of our community, and why is cinema not included in this incredible arts landscape that we have here? So that was, the basis for doing what we did. But, we didn't have any money. We were a couple of 20 somethings, or I guess maybe I was 30 at the time, that had very little in the way of resources. We couldn't start a for-profit cinema. So the only way to do it was to get the community to be a part of it and to believe in the same thing we believed in. And so that, required us to be collaborators from the beginning. And even some of the early programming that we did, before we had a physical space to call our own, we were doing pop-up screenings throughout the community. So we would call on other people to, when we actually didn't have our own screen. So we borrowed the inflatable screen from the Summer of the Arts here in Iowa City, or we needed venues. So we went to churches and rock clubs and, other public spaces that had, a screen or plenty of seats so that we could put people in there. And it just required us to be, collaborators from the beginning and to think about what other people needed out of it. Because we had our idea of what, a pop-up screening might do for us, but what would it do for these potential partners? Why would they want to be a part of it? And so I think that's a really important aspect of all of this, is to think about who else benefits from these cultural opportunities and from the art that you're interested in. Because I think a lot of people do, and you just need to make sure that they see that, and they can understand how being a part of it will benefit them as well.
Do you think it's better to meet the potential collaborators where they are, like going to their meeting, or is it better to say, hey, we're going to be in meeting room A at the Iowa City Public Library at 7 o'clock on this day. Y'all come down. How do you reach out and meet potential collaborators?
I think you got to do both. I think making sure that you are open to the public and the people who maybe you haven't already invited in, but make it open. So you have a public meeting at the local library or in a community space, and invite anyone to participate. I think that's good because you never know who might show up out of the woodwork that can really help your project. But I think you also need to make it easy for the people who you really are asking for their help. And so if you want something important from someone, don't make it difficult for them to meet you in the first place. Go to them, and so that the hard part isn't setting up a meeting. The hard part is like, hey, I need you to assist us with this project. So I think meet people where they are and make it possible for other people to meet you.
So when an event is coming around like the Iowa City Book Festival, how do you make your piece of the puzzle fit in that larger overarching piece of the puzzle? How do you see yourselves as a film institution collaborating with something that's emphasizing reading and books?
Sure. Well, Iowa City, one of the problems we have here is that there's like too much going on all the time. So we are always trying to be conscientious of, how do we fit in with other people's programming, because we want to be additive. We don't want to, be competitors, right? We're all working towards the same thing. So we have a film festival that we started 2 years ago. We knew that the book festival was going to be programming around the same time. And so early on, we just said, hey, we don't want to step on your toes. Put this how can we make these things work together? How can they share space? And thankfully, John Kenyon and the folks at the book festival were open to the idea, and they also believe that we could create something even bigger and more essential if we work together. I also think storytelling is storytelling. We're in a city of literature. So many books end up on the big screen. And so from the beginning, our film festival was designed to be in celebration and appreciation of the art of adaptation and that relationship between page and screen. So that was something that we thought of in the very construction of the festival. We didn't want to just build a festival that was a run-of-the-mill festival that could happen anywhere in any community around the country. We wanted to make a film festival that could only happen here in Iowa City, a city of literature. And so really, it's been designed that way. We share a number of guests over the course of our, festivals, which do share dates, share the same week. So we have joint panels, we have joint parties. We're encouraging people to move back and forth between the two festivals. And at the end of the day, there are hundreds of thousands of people in our community. And until the day comes when every one of them is downtown participating in the festival, which Betsy might be able to tell you there's not enough parking for that. But until that day, when everyone is doing it, that's the goal, is just to get more people to come downtown. So we don't see each other as competitors. We're both working to the same goal, which is to get people down into downtown Iowa City to participate in a big cultural activity.
Timeline for planning. Dan, if a community wants to see something actually come to fruition in the summertime, when should they start planning that? Like a year out, 6 months out? What kind of guidelines?
I would say a year to 18 months is a good timeline for at least a public art project. So it takes time to identify location. Sometimes it could be part of a larger project. So if there's like a revitalization of an area and you want to include an artwork, you have to plan ahead in there, because the planning for that, let's say you want to put it near the river, there might be a levee involved. So you have to be sure that you're not going to compromise things like that. And so, yeah, getting the infrastructure ahead of time, making sure that it's there that can support whatever type of artwork or project you're trying to do. And getting that in earlier is better than trying to shoehorn something in later, which can happen. Is sometimes like, well, we designed this beautiful building, but now we want to put artwork in it, but we don't really have anywhere to do it because there's no walls because it's all glass or something like that. So planning that ahead of time. If you want to include it, get it involved sooner, and then decide at what point you want to involve the artist. If you want the artist involved in planning, say, a plaza or a park, if they want to have some input from the artist, that needs to come earlier. So you need to identify the artist earlier. You need to make sure you have your funding in line. And because you can't commit to an artist, or you shouldn't commit to an artist or a project if you don't have the funding. It's always a little leery when I read calls for artists that say, like, we have 50% of the project secured. We hope to get the rest by the time we have, by the time we need it, which is it's just kind of bad business that way. Because what happens if that funding falls through and you're halfway through fabricating the artwork or designing the plaza, whatever the project may be. So yeah, I would say a year to 18 months is a comfortable timeline. If you try and cram it in too fast, it's going to look rushed, and you can run into some problems, which you don't want to.
And Andrew, how long do you spend in planning out something like the film festival or any kind of collaboration you might be doing through Film Scene?
Well, it really varies for us. I mean, right now we're trying to set the dates for our next year's film festival. We just need the Iowa Hawkeyes football team to get their schedule put together. So if the Big Ten is listening, hurry up with that. But a festival, there's so many moving parts. So we really are looking a year out for that. Like, as soon as we're done with this one, we'll be planning the next one. But we have a lot of there's so many regular collaborations that we do throughout the course of a year, and most of those come together 2 to 3 months in advance. I think is what we target. Having more time is certainly helpful, but we're in kind of a unique business where every Monday morning we're setting our show times for the next week, so we're used to working on very short windows. That said, it's always better to have more time. You're going to be thankful for that extra week or that extra month to do outreach, to get people to buy into your project, to think about all the details, as Dan was saying. So I would give yourself more time than you think. Whatever you think you need, more than that.
Betsy, what do you think about pooling resources? Say you have a nonprofit that's on a shoestring, and then an organization like the Angler that actually has a working budget. How do you make it equitable, and how do you fold smaller organizations into a larger collaboration? Any words of wisdom there?
Sure. I mean, it depends on what the project is and what the mission behind it is, I suppose. But making it mutually beneficial for both parties will be really important. I know that the Angler or Film Scene or other that have paid staff that work for them, that it is really helpful to bring in those organizations for, smaller organizations that may not have paid staff or, a part-time staff person. But to bring in the collaborations, making it mutually beneficial will be your best bet, and finding out what works for both missions. So a lot of times I think with like the Angler or other organizations, they have a lot of programming that they're trying to do, or new, service elements that they're trying to provide to the community. And so kind of fitting in with their existing missions and visions and programming is a lot of times an option. And we get a lot of groups that come to us and say, how can we be part of this event, or how can we be part of what you're doing? And a lot of times there's opportunity, whether it's just a small programming element, to be on a panel, to be in a workshop, to incorporate yourselves in a small way and create those relationships, will probably be a good door open for a lot of small organizations that may not have big budget, or may not have the staff to support whatever project you're trying to accomplish.
And Andrew, have you been able to incorporate smaller organizations into your larger projects too? I feel like I've seen that happen with Film Scene.
Yeah, all the time. I think, large or small, a lot of the organizations we work with come from, there's a lot of service organizations in our community that we partner with on screenings, so that we can kind of amplify their mission and the work that they do. Certainly we work with all sorts of artistic collaborators, whether those are large organizations. We work with major movie distributors, or individual artists, or small collectives. we're really open to all of it. And I think what Betsy said is good advice. You have to figure out what people's strengths are, whether they're large or small, and how does that fit into what you do? Because yeah, I think the most important thing is that you have enthusiastic collaborators at whatever level they are, and I think that's what we look for most of all, is are people excited to be a part of this?
And we didn't really talk about the kinds of films that you show. I think of Film Scene as sort of an art house, an indie film, but you do occasionally have some first run things that you might find at a larger Cineplex too. Can you talk a little bit about the kinds of things you show?
Yeah, we're fortunate now with 5 screens that we can be pretty diverse in our film slate. So we open new films every Friday, just like most movie theaters around the country, and those can range from the very small. We have a lot of international films or documentaries or American indies that might be put in one of our smaller rooms, because we have theaters that range in size from 20 seats to 115 seats. But we also recognize that great art can take many shapes and sizes, and so when there's a big film that we think is something that meets our mission or meets our artistic standards, we'll put that on the big screen, and that'll bring people in, and it's just as important to us. It's part of our mission to present cinema as an art form, and that means all types of cinema. And so we have the best presentation standards here in the area, and so we want people to be able to experience good movies in the best possible setting, the best possible environment, with the best possible technical standards. And so that goes for stories big and small.
How did you survive the pandemic?
We sold a lot of drive up popcorn. Um, but I think we just tried to be creative, and at the end of the day, what I think what we learned during that period of time, which reinforced something that has been like kind of an evolving understanding, is that we're really a community organization. We're an organization that builds community. We just happen to do it through cinema. And I think that's what most good arts organizations do, is they build community through their chosen art form. And so when the pandemic came and it was hard for us to show movies in our space, we worked together to do streaming watch parties. We had some virtual cinema, and then we had this drive up popcorn thing where we got to see our favorite people, our members, our patrons, briefly hand them some of their favorite treats, and they could go home and watch a movie, and it's just maintain that connection. And that was the most important thing, is to keep those people that matter to us, keep them close during that time, so that when we open back up, they were there for us.
Did you also have a program where, like, I could invite 10 of my friends and sort of buy a screen and show a film and keep physical distancing?
Yeah, we did a lot. That's a good memory. We did a lot of private rentals at that time too. So whatever people felt like was their comfortable kind of pod, where they felt safe in the movie theater, we would open up the screens for that sort of thing as well. And then I should also say, I think what every arts organization needed was that that federal support, state support, grant support. We couldn't have kept our staff together without that, or paid our electrical bills, because those still had to be paid. So yeah, we were incredibly grateful for that sort of emergency relief.
Dan, did public art happen during the pandemic? Were you able to have any drawings done? I mean, I know school became virtual. Did public art planning become virtual too? Or did it all just kind of get placed on hold for a bit?
It was kind of a little bit of all of that. A lot of things got put on hold or paused. We were in the middle of some projects at the time. One of the things that we've been taking on lately is a lot of conservation of the artworks that have been out in public space for 30, 40, 50 years now, and communities need them repaired. And we've been collaborating a lot with Iowa State, University of Iowa. And at the time, we were working on a project with Iowa State to refinish a few of their sculptures that were on campus that needed some attention. And the sort of the nice thing, I guess, the bright side of it is we work in pretty big spaces and a lot of outdoor places, and so we didn't have to worry about being too confined, or we could easily social distance and still do our work. And then right now this conference that we're doing in Zoom, it was something that we were all learning at the time. And I remember having a lot of conversations and a lot of shared screens with scribbles on it about what are we going to do here, what are we going to do here, and then and yeah, a lot of correspondence with artists, long distance, and then planning for projects, and then yeah, it was interesting for sure, but we were able to sort of plow through.
I would
Betsy,
just
go
Oh, I
ahead.
was just gonna just really quickly add that, another thing that we started doing during the pandemic, and a shout out to Betsy and her team, is we worked with the downtown district and the city of Iowa City to do outdoor screenings, film screenings. So that became a thing that now has evolved into, we have an outdoor cinema screening series here, Film Scene in the Park, that this year had a record number of attendees. Over 4,000 people came to watch movies in the park right next to us. And that program started during the pandemic when we were looking for a safe way to gather. It was something that we always had in mind, but that it kind of got accelerated then. And so there's some lessons that we definitely took forward from that time.
And I think I remember going to see a movie on top of your first film scene up on the roof. And do you still do those? Because that was pretty cool.
Yeah, we still do rooftop screenings and occasional. We work with Betsy and her team for the block party and do a screening during that event. So yeah, we love outdoor screenings. They're fun. They're a little nerve-wracking watching the Iowa weather, but when it works, it's great.
Betsy, does your group do you gather a meeting of the minds weekly, monthly? How does that work? Is it
Sure. So
Project X?
what'd you say? What was
Do
the
you have
last part?
a Project X? Is that part of your group? Or is that might be another panel? I kind
X
of get
marks
my
the arts. Yeah.
panels. Yeah.
Oh yeah, X marks the arts. No, that is, yeah, we do. That's what we're kind of calling our downtown Iowa City Cultural and Entertainment District. So we were designated as a downtown cultural and entertainment district years ago. We let the designation lapse, and then in the last few years, we had a renewed interest in bringing that designation back. So we reapplied with the state. And then we've been designated for a few years now. And so we took that opportunity as a restart on how to get all of our arts groups back together, nonprofit, for-profit, university arts groups, to kind of start meeting monthly. And so we've been meeting monthly over the last, I think it's almost 2 years now that we've been meeting monthly to sometimes it's just what's going on with your organizations. How can we, better work on collaboration, working on our marketing efforts, working on collaborative events, discussing things that may be really applicable to the arts groups that they don't see each other all the time. A lot of times our nonprofit, partners work together frequently, but whether or not the University of Iowa departments are part of that conversation or the for-profit live music venues are part of that conversation, that doesn't always happen. So our monthly meetings are really, really a good time for everybody to kind of take a pause and just talk arts and culture in downtown.
Why is it so important to get the community involved in the arts besides just giving people something fun to do or see? What is the overarching benefit? And anybody can jump in on that.
I mean, I would just say that, since the, dawn of time, human beings have been gathering for, storytelling and, make music together, the arts have been essential, I think, for many years. And I think that's still very true. It's just in our nature. We want to have these communal experiences. They bring us closer together. They help us, look out in the same direction as our neighbors, see the world, think about, things that are important to us, and to do it together. I think really that communal aspect, I can't stress that enough. Whether it's a shared movie or music performance, or just everybody seeing the same piece of public art over the course of many weeks, it's that shared experience that's a huge part of it.
Dan, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's to what Andrew's saying there. I think it makes us human. It's that expression, our having this moment where you see something and you take pause, you think about it for a second. You may or may not like it. You're still having a reaction to it. I tend to think about things like in public spaces. it becomes a surprise sometimes. If you think about you're going to a museum to look at art, or you're going to the zoo to look at animals, you're already in that mindset that I'm going to go see these things. But if you're walking down the street and you see a mural, it's like, oh, I didn't realize that was there. And you start to look at details of it. You walk by it every day on your way to work, see more and more details. And then, the one thing I think about a lot is people tend to get a little apprehensive about implementing arts from a public standpoint, but the first, when you take it away, that's when people really get upset. It's like, oh, I really appreciated having that, and now it's gone. And so getting past that period of apprehension and getting things implemented, I think really helps build our community identities. And you can say, like, you think about the Bean in Chicago. You can't watch a Chicago sports event without seeing some sort of picture as they go to commercial of the Bean.
So how do
I would just say that our arts economy is a major part of our community, as it is probably in almost every community. So all of our nonprofit partners, for-profit partners, even our public art, it makes a big difference in our economic development for our community, why people want to live here, why people want to enjoy time here, why people want to visit, our tourism to the space. So it is a big part of our economy overall too, to take it to the money, I guess, and not as much to the quality of life. But it makes a big difference, and it has a major impact on all of our entities downtown. The restaurants benefit from it, our shops benefit from it, people who work downtown benefit from our engagement with our venues and our public art overall. And a lot of times, as an organization that really tries to drive foot traffic to a space, public art and the engagement with public art is how we do it a lot of times, because that's how we know people want to experience something authentic and original.
How about recent projects like the Herkies on Parade that were just there this summer? Where in Cedar Rapids, we've had a couple of homages to American Gothic, Grant Wood's famous painting, and also to the Wright brothers having spent part of their childhood in Cedar Rapids. We had public art of airplanes one summer where artists could paint them and decorate them any way they so chose. What do you see, or what kind of reaction have you seen, Betsy, from the Herkies, the public? They're just there for maybe the summer.
Yeah, we have a lot of temporary public art installations that come through our community, and the Herkies, I think they were probably the original temporary art installation series. This is the third iteration, so they come back every 10 years, and our partners at Think Iowa City really drive that, the Convention and Visitors Bureau here in the community. But what it allows a paid artist opportunity, which is really phenomenal. And it really allows artists of all different skill levels to be involved. So some of them are, professional artists. Others may just be, new. They might be high school students. They might be, emerging artists, whatever it may be. But a lot of different opportunities for artists in the community to be paid for their work, be put on very public display. And from, a tourism standpoint, it drives a lot of foot traffic. So you're not going to just engage with one Herky. They've been very strategically placed so that you move around the community and you engage with as many Herkies as possible. It's obviously a big driver for families and kids. Being the University of Iowa mascot, it also, has a love there with the university, but there was a map created around it so that you were encouraged to go to as many as possible. They've done a really good job just with marketing to encourage you to go to all 101 Herkies that they created. So the Herkies are a really good example of how to drive interest in a short amount of time behind a public art installation. And a lot of the temporary public art installations do a very similar thing. They're very high visibility. They drive a lot of foot traffic. A lot of them are interactive, which I would argue the Herkies are, because you want to take your picture next to them. You want to, they have a very fun pose. So a lot of the interactive temporary public art installations encourage engagement. And I think that we all know that that's a benefit on all levels. And a lot of them are very accessible for anyone who wants to engage with it, whether or not you're just viewing or you're, actively participating in the installation itself.
What's the key to moving this all forward through the generations? I know that Andrew and Dan, you've both involved students over the years. How do you build that next generation of people who want to bring something to their community that is going to be lasting and a excitement builder for the future.
Well, I think it's important to start engaging as young as possible with just how you can, create something, whether it be a piece of music, an artwork. But like a lot of things that we do, we work with schools where a teacher in their art class will have a unit where the kids design a sculpture for a community selects it, they get a grant, and we fabricate it, and we take it back to the community and install it there permanently. And so that gives the community a starting point. So a lot of these are communities that range from, towns of 5,000, 10,000 people all the way up. And so it gives a lot of opportunity for them to start, building that cultural landscape in their community. And to what Betsy was saying, it's like, the Herkies, the Panthers on parade types of things are really accessible, and it gets people excited early on. And temporary shows across the state is important because it starts to build sort of a general education and an idea about artwork. Lots of communities have rotating sculpture shows, and so it gives a good lays a good groundwork for people to start taking on more ambitious projects in the community.
Andrew, how do you get young people involved and excited about your art form?
Sure. Well, I love what Dan's doing and involving students in the making of, and we try to do that as well. We have summer animation camps here that sell out every year in like 48 hours because they're so popular. And that's a testament to the great educators that we have running those camps, but also the experience that those kids have. And the work that those kids do over the course of the summer, we put it on screen before every film here at Film Scene. There are these little intro bites that we do. So I think it's, giving, people of all ages really, but especially young people, giving them an opportunity to actually create and to participate in the making of, but also in the appreciation of those art forms. So just opportunities to participate first. And I think that's where it starts, and that's where people get a hunger I think like an understanding of the art form too, because I think a thing that we don't do enough in this country is really talk about how we interpret art. So we try to do media literacy lessons before our free kids and family series so that kids have an understanding of what they're watching, because the more you can talk about an art form, the better, the more accessible it becomes, and the more comfortable you get engaging with those art forms. So I think just giving kids the tools to understand art and to make art, that's where it starts. And then I think then there's just a natural inclination to like make that a part of your lifelong practice.
Excellent. Well, we have just a few minutes left in our session, and we did have a question that popped up on the Whova app. And so we've answered part of this, but I'll still ask this because there's, I think, some more to be said about it. This person says, we've had some success with trading event program and online advertising, but would like to develop more meaningful and sustainable partnerships. What opportunities are there for organizations of all sizes to enhance each other's programming and what's been successful locally? So I think that brings in mind a very clear need, marketing. You've got to get the word out. So how can you involve, or do you involve, Betsy, people who have the marketing acumen to help spread the word?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what you're doing and what you're, planning on marketing. But a lot of times this messaging, especially when it comes to arts and culture, most people want to share this messaging. And a lot of times we turn to our core partners, whether it's our local convention and visitors bureau. I would recommend definitely connecting with them. Your city, their communications department, a lot of times what they have to communicate is press releases and, not such exciting information. A lot of times they're really excited to share public information, whether it's happening at the public library or in a public space or, an event that may be really interesting to the community. And that's all free marketing. And they will be, I'm sure, happy to share that information. Your county, any partners that you think might have an interest in your whatever event or programming, whatever it might be, I would definitely recommend reaching out and saying, can you share this message? with as many people as possible. So it's not like paid marketing in that way. A lot of times we encourage, people to share the messaging, but for the most part, when it comes to our temporary public art installations or, anything with X Marks the Arts with our downtown cultural entertainment district, we use social media, and we do pay for it to be boosted. And we do all of, we put it on multiple different platforms. And then with that, there's the opportunity for community members to share, to put it on different groups, to have your venues share, whatever it might be. It just becomes really accessible for people to engage with that messaging.
Somebody who appreciates getting a well-written press release, I would like to just encourage you to make sure that you've answered all the who, what, when, where, why, and hows before you hit send. Because every now and then, even with veteran groups, I have to push back and say, unless I've skipped it, I see everything but the date that it's happening. Yes. And so, and as a writer, that's something I am always making sure that I have there. Thank you so much, everyone. I appreciate Andrew Sherburn from Film Scene, Dan Perry from UNI and the Arts Incubator, Betsy Potter from the Downtown District in Iowa City. Such great information to share with us. And just as a reminder, we have plenty more sessions for you viewers to clue into over the next 2 days, today and tomorrow. And please, we're glad to have such a great audience. Thank you so much.